Pascal Siakam has been unbelievable this year for the Raptors, making another leap towards stardom, superstardom even, with his offensive growth. And today, we're going to go back and look at some of his old prospect tape along with his current game, just to see how far he's come and how he developed. And one of the concerns with Siakam at the time, aside from him being an older sophomore, was just that he didn't shoot. The extent of his real shooting possessions looked like stuff like this, where he would just turn into little post hooks. His usage was really interesting. Is Siakam was a mid post or low block scorer, where he'd do these little turns into floaters or hook shots way more regularly than he'd work on the perimeter. And a lot of his most impressive jumper-esque shots were these little touch shots where he'd shoot from a weird angle and use his length to kind of reach the ball into a spot where otherwise may not get. He was really solid at these face-up jumpers, which you never see him taking anymore. The extent of his pull-up shooting was pretty short, but there were real interior arc shooting flashes. And the thing with Siakam is that he was just an incredible mid-range shooter. That far two number is unbelievable. And I talked about this before, far twos, long mid ranges as an indicator for shooting progression. And Siakam's was one of the best and most extreme examples that we'll see. The mid-range shooting was definitely a reason to be optimistic for his future three-point shooting projection. He even flashed some rare off-movement stuff in the mid-range. Nothing crazy, but pretty impressive for a guy who's 6'9" with his level of athletic tools. And then these are the kind of flashes that are more similar to the stuff that we see today, with Siakam stepping back into it mid-range. That's really impressive space creation for a guy that size. Did I accidentally skip forward? No. Yeah, just really impressive kind of creation for a guy that size. Someone who can size up into pull-up jumpers as well. This is something that Siakam does all the time now, just using his driving threat to basically force this defender to back off and open up a jumper. But this stuff was all pretty uncommon, and he didn't shoot at all. Pascal shot 17 threes in his college career. He was not a shooter in the slightest, which was understandably concerning because he was a super outlier in terms of shooting development. These are the drafted players since 2010 who shot over 50 far. Siakam made 120 far twos, but I have to crank this all the way down to 50 just to get a sample, and shot less than 1 3 a game. And it's not a lot of shooters. Randall has had his moments of shooting, but it's been inconsistent. Same with Clark as well. And even if we drop this to 2 threes a game, we're still not getting a bunch of great names. Warren has had a crazy shooting breakout. Grant Williams learned to shoot. Draymond has never really shot that well, except for a couple seasons. But Siakam has broken the trend just because of how overwhelmingly good he was as a long two shooter, and the fact that he was a pretty good free throw shooter as well over his career, 72, 73% for the career on that volume is pretty solid given his incredible mid-range and finishing numbers and how great his touch and his versatility as a scorer was. And obviously, Pascal has parlayed that into some very impressive pull-up shooting creation as someone who, again, uses the threat of his drive and a quick size-up dribble to pull up over his defenders from long mid-range. He has been absolutely smoking from long mid-range this year, I believe. Yeah, he's shooting, or at least from the 10 to 16 area. 45%, incredibly good from that short mid area where he's so prolific. Over 50% is crazy, and his threes are up, from the last 3 years as well. So his shooting is just incredible, and the fact that he's been a stable 3-point shooter at this point over the last couple of years, aside from this 2021 season. 4 out of the last 5 years, he's been really stable on good volume and good percentages for a guy with his creation load. Is so impressive, given the fact that he just didn't shoot at all at college. They're even running him off some movement threes this year, which is really cool to see, given that this is a new development for him. Again, we see this same baseline out of bounds play against Brooklyn, or a similar one where they'll have him twirl off of Scotty into a movement three. This one ends up being an and one as well. Just incredibly impressive shooting development. And while he hasn't made a ton of pull-up threes this year. His spacing is just so powerful off the ball as well. Obviously, he's the Raptors' most dangerous on-ball threat, but when guys like Fred or Scotty or OG whatever drive, like if players are too overzealous helping, Scotty will burn them. He is a very good catch-and-shoot shooter, just not someone you can really leave open and hope that they miss anymore, which is really, really great and has been a huge thing over the last couple years, but just a nice thing to have. And again, Scott, also someone that you just can't really close out to, because if you do close out hard, he will use his handle and his ability to shoot from that elbow, those little short mid-ranges to punish you like crazy. So his shooting is certainly interesting, but I think a little simpler to explain. But Pascal's creation, his handling, his advantage creation, his on-ball stuff is fascinating. Considering that, I think I had someone reply to what was his role like in college? Like, as I mentioned, he was like a high post, low post, face up, back to the basket scorer. But there were glimpses of the athletic tools. Like, he really wasn't a great handler. He picked up his dribble often. He wasn't comfortable handling pressure or creating avenues for himself when he did attack from the perimeter. But he did have traits. And these traits seem to have been overlooked in terms of his creation upside. I think the first thing I noticed with Siakam was like he was really fast. Like, you could just see, even if it's a little out of control here, how quick he's able to move and cut into this gap for a guy who is like 6'9", 230 or whatever at this point. And he was a really smart off-ball player too, which I've talked about before is important for projecting going forward. And it's plays like these where you can see like the kind of creation tools he uses today blossoming, where he's able to like wrap out of this double with some pretty nice handle. Look how low he is to the ground because of how flexible his like torso upper body is. He can really get low and generate leverage. And at this pickup point, it doesn't really look like there's any advantage here or that he's going to be able to get into the front of the rim, but his stride length is so overwhelming, and Siakam loves to use his long strides to get into the lane and to generate advantages for himself at the rim. So this is the stuff that Siakam was doing. It doesn't look like the NBA stuff, but was the infancy of the kind of creation that he does today. His burst, as I mentioned, was just really good. Like, when he would step out to this like mid-range area, it was difficult for guys his size to stay in front of him because of how fast he was. And again, just check out those long strides. There's really not much any defender on this St. Mary's team could do to stay in front of Siakam like that, especially when he was able to take one dribble and like jump from about the middle of the paint, glide through the air, and finish. This was like the extent of Siakam's perimeter creation, like one, maybe two dribble drives into the paint. But despite not being able to really create with his handle or his pacing like he does today, because of his speed and his explosion, he was able to get into the teeth of the defense often. And, Siakam has developed considerably as a passer too. He was never going to make this pass in college, even if it's probably the better play to, find a wide open guy in the corner. Obviously, it ends up working out. But Siakam really was getting these creation ops. Here is a very, very infant, fledgling version of his spin move, where you can see Siakam's a little out of control here. He's kind of falling over, but look how low he is, the leverage he's able to get to spin over to his left and hit this little righty hook shot. It's like, have you seen this one before? This is just like a pretty impressive creation tool for someone who was this large and athletic at this stage of his development. And it's definitely worth noting that although Siakam was 22 as a sophomore, which is old, he was late to basketball, I believe, too, which means his dev curve was behind. So there was still a lot of developing to do, as we have seen to this day as well. Again, we see the stride length really impress. That was one of his main tools as a scorer, just being able to use his speed and his strength and his long strides. I mean, look where he is when he picks up the ball again. Like, he's outside of the paint, and when he finishes his strides, he's almost at the rim. And then, as I mentioned, the finishing, the tough shot making, all of it, so good. And we still see Scott use these same tools today, just in a more NBA-oriented way. He's still weaponizing his speed to get all the way into the paint, collapse the defense, and kick out for open jumpers. Like, guys this large and this fast are very, very rare when he can get all the way into the paint. 5 defenders collapse. And then with Scotty's improved passing, he can just do whatever he wants on kickouts. He's been eating on these simple, driving kicks all year where defenses have no chance of staying in front of him and are able to score like that. I think this is a just cool example of how far the creation has come, as we've seen all of this before. Like, we saw that spin move, we've seen the little size ups into jumper, but now we see it all coming together in a beautiful, harmonious way where Scotty's able to use his handle and his footwork and his pacing and his timing, again, changing speeds and directions and using that spin move to get around his defender and finish. And he makes it look so smooth and so easy. And this is really the kind of creation that that Pascal excels at. Again, there's that stride length again, as he's able to get, I don't really know why they're guarding him like this, but we see those long strides. Look at the pickup point right here, almost like in the middle of the paint, and then he's able to use his long strides and his length as a finishing tool to get into the lane right there. Something Pascal does, like, he still posts up a reasonable amount, but they just look different. And the fact that he's able to blend his drives and his speed into post-ups makes his scoring all the more dynamic. Before it was either Scotty catches the ball, or not Scotty, I keep saying Scotty. Pascal catches the ball on the block and is able to turn into a post-up, or he's taking a one dribble drive into a shot or a layup in college. But now he's able to string together handling moves, and when that can't create an advantage, he'll turn his back to the basket and win with his footwork, making his playmaking and his on-ball creation so much more dynamic and difficult to stop. And again, we see that burst on display. John Collins is a very athletic player, not the greatest on-ball defender in the world, but a very athletic big man that Pascal is able to get by. Again, we see the leverage. Look how low he is right here. Pascal's torso is almost parallel to the ground, and with John Collins standing straight up, there's really nothing that he can do at that point to keep Pascal from getting in front of him and getting wherever he wants, basically. We see this kind of aggressive speed post up, like speed to power almost, throughout his game, where we see he's low against Nick Claxton, he's using his off arm to create, but he can't get initial advantages, so he just turns his back and hits a beautiful little post hook. His speed allows him to get this great positioning. Again, it would be more difficult for Pascal to try to find a post up right here, right in the middle of the circle, and have one of his teammates find him. So he just goes and creates it himself, because Claxton has to back up to respect his speed and his handle. So he's able to get all the way to the restricted area by himself. It's a very unique style of creation, but it's really, really effective. And as I mentioned before, it's why he's just absolutely eating from this short kind of mid-paint area as well. It's really, really difficult for basically anyone to stop so far. Scotty's handle and speed is so impressive for someone 6'9". Evan Mobley is not an easy defender to beat, but Scotty's handle and his ability to use his kind of pacing. You see this little choppy footwork here to kind of mix up Evan Mobley. His hips are not set. He's not really sure where Pascal's going to go, and he uses a quick cross to get to the paint, and I believe that was called a foul. That Pascal, was able to generate. His passing is still not, super complex or anything, but he's able to generate a ton of assists off of his scoring gravity, which is all you really need. It's at the point where when you double Pascal, he's able to find cutters and shooters pretty regularly. And the Raptors have a bunch of willing cutters and shooters who Pascal can work off of. And as we saw with an earlier clip, it's a lot of this just driving, the help collapses, and Pascal is more than willing to kick out and, rack up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 assists really easily, without any crazy high-level passes or pick and roll stuff, just off of his gravity and transition and off of, exploiting simple help. Again, we see some live dribble stuff developing too, where it's a very simple read. Embiid steps up to cover his drive. Harden isn't sliding down here, so he bounces it to Scotty for a wide open dunk. And obviously there's still progression that can be made for him as a passer. I think that's maybe the last thing is, this is the wrong clip. I did not mean to put that clip. But point being, the passing is simplistic but effective, and all it really needs to be. But Pascal has just turned himself into a wonderful creator. And I think it's a testament to what the Raptors do with their like creation handling development for these big wing forward types like Siakam, Scotty, OG Anunoby, Precious, even like Boucher, all guys who had like really impressive tools and size, but either didn't handle it all or were bad handlers or bad creators before the NBA, that have been developed into guys who can dribble and use pacing and timing or whatever other means to handle the ball and create offense. It's unorthodox and sometimes, grindy to watch, but it's very, very effective and very, very impressive, as Siakam's been one of the 15 best players in the league for sure so far this year. But it all came from a very different start and a very different start to his career. And it is remarkable how far he's come and how good he is and just how fun he is to watch at this point.